Hey everyone, are you ready to be fired up? Because I sure am. I've got Jaclyn Mellone here. She's actually one of my masterminds with me, and she's going to be talking about how to demonstrate your authority by being the guest on podcasts or by having your own podcast. So no matter what business you're in or what profession you're in, this podcast today actually applies to you. So sit back and let's get ready to be fired up. Hi, Jaclyn. Thanks for being here. Super happy to have you.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. So, one thing I love about you is like you're always just so positive and happy, and just so I love your voice, and you're such a joy to be here. I know that sounds weird, but I always love your voice. If you don't know Jaclyn, she's very inspiring and very much upbeat. So, talk to us. Tell us like what you do, who you serve, how you can help people.
Okay. Well, first of all, I see all of those things in you. I feel like I'm around you and it's just like instant energy burst. I love it.
Aww.
Oh, yes. Okay. So I am Jaclyn Mellone, host of the Go-To Gal podcast. And on Go-To Gal, we really talk about becoming that go-to gal, that go-to person in your industry from the inside out. And I know we both love talking about mindset. So much of it is the mindset and that inner work, but paired with the strategy, because you could do mindset all day long, but you got to be taking action and doing the strategy too. And so with that, I found that the fastest way that I've been able to build authority is through leveraging the podcasting platform. So I help people make the most of that, whether it's starting their own podcast, growing their podcast, or if you're not quite ready for that yet, being a guest on other people's podcasts.
So tell me, and I love that because one of the things that I teach all the time, and I talk about it, I live it, eat it, breathe it, is being that known as that go-to authority, and we utilize video to do so. But not everyone's comfortable utilizing video, and so I really wanted to have you on to kind of let my listeners think about a different way or in conjunction with video to be able to get their message out there. For example, this podcast that we're doing right now is also being recorded, and we're going to use this and put it, and use it for other things. But so how can, let's just say, a normal local professional, let's say a mortgage broker or a realtor, how would they utilize a podcast? And if you can even talk about like what things they would talk about and all that, if they did have their own, like, can you kind of get into that with me?
Sure. So one of the things that people don't think about when it comes to podcasting is how powerful it is as a networking tool. So a lot of times we think about podcasting, we're like, but I don't have a big audience, or people are going to listen from everywhere, and I just do business locally, or things like that. But the power of podcasting is that now you have a platform, right? It's an authority platform, just like a YouTube channel or a blog or a TV show, right? But you have this authority platform that can essentially open up a lot of doors. Dare I say all the doors, but maybe not all the doors, but a lot of doors for you. So those local leaders, those people that can be your super connectors, right? And open up different circles for you, or be those referral partners. Maybe you have relationships with them. Maybe you want relationships with them. Having a podcast is a great way to invite those people on as a guest, right? Highlight them, continue to build that relationship, or start building that relationship, right? And at the same time, you're building a community and you're creating content and you're collaborating with other people in your community. Dare I say, it doesn't even matter if nobody listens, right? Like, and hopefully they do. Hopefully they do. But when I started my first podcast in 2015 with a co-host, and we grew it for 3 years, over 300 episodes. And by all measures, it was a success. But we got to that point where both of our personal brands had really grown, and it was hard to have that joint brand together. And so at that point, she was stopping podcasting and I was keeping going, but rebranding. And I remember having that fear of like, what if nobody wants to listen anymore? And even though my business is not local and is so different, the power of the relationships and having those opportunities to really connect with people, and how much I love that, but also how beneficial it's been for my business. I gave myself that same pep talk of like, you know what, even if everybody stops listening, I know this is going to continue to be worth it for me while I'm building this new audience to just be able to still have these conversations. So I think that mindset switch of, yes, you're creating content in a way that's maybe more natural for people too. Of, okay, we're used to sitting down and having coffee. Okay, well, let's have coffee on Zoom and just press record, right?
I know you guys are
And
coffee. We're having.
yeah.
I can't drink coffee, Jaclyn. In case you don't know, like there's a big sign in my office that says "Do not."
You are human coffee.
I'm human coffee. Yeah, I'm not allowed to have coffee. I'm not allowed it. Okay, so great. So basically, it's about building relationships within the community, and then getting the content out there. And what a better way to do it than a local service provider, right? A local business. So let's talk a little bit about topics, like what kind of things and who would they interview? What topics do they have to talk about? Let's just say we're going after a real estate agent or a lender. Would they have to talk just real estate, or what would you recommend?
So sometimes in that capacity, being niche does not work to your advantage, right? Because if the only topic of the show is real estate, then you're only able to bring people on that can talk about real estate. So you want to think about, okay, on the relationship side of things, who might you want to bring on as guests, but also who are the people that you do want listening, and what would they be interested in listening to? Because that's, the ultimate goal is to be having listeners listen too, right? So just to zoom out for a second, the way I think about who is the person that someone's going to hire, right? When you're that go-to gal, that go-to guy, it's not just about the relationship, right? Because it's not always like, how many times does your neighbor hire someone else to list their house? Or like, right? Yeah. You're like, what? Like, that's literally what I do when we live next door, and they go hire somebody else, right? So it's not always about the relationship. But at the same time, when someone makes a decision like that to hire someone, it's not always about the ultimate authority either. They're not looking for the person that has the best qualifications or is the most expert that there is. It's really a combination of the two. So I say authority plus relationship equals top of mind. And with a podcast, you get the ability to build your authority because you're on this authority platform talking about your expertise in some way, shape, or form. So having guests is powerful, but leaving room either in those conversations or in solo conversations to put that spotlight on yourself and your own expertise, right? But then also they're getting to know you, right? So like you're sharing about yourself, and whether that's through those conversations or through your intro, you have that ability to build a relationship with the masses during that because they're listening, they feel like they know you, and they're spending time with you. People don't just listen to a podcast, right? They listen to a podcast and cook and clean and walk and drive and run and all these other things. They're multitasking. Because of that, they're willing to give more time into that content than maybe other forms of content that require that dedicated listening or watching time, right? So they might spend a half hour, an hour with you on a weekly basis or more, right? So
I love that.
Back to so you got to think of it as like, okay, this is long form content, can really build a relationship. People feel like they know you.
Yeah.
So then you think, okay, so what is that content going to be? And it might be something just about your local area or a topic that your ideal clients are really passionate about. I don't think it has to be this super, like, if you make it about just real estate, then your competitors are probably going to want to listen, right? Or people that are going to want to listen are people that are ready to make that they're putting.
It can be more of like a community thing where you like, it's like there's a little in every episode, there's a little bit of a market update or what's happening in the market or something, right? Like a real estate tip maybe, but it's just like really interviewing local community people. Like, hey, I'm going to interview like, let's give an example. But remember when the whole shutdown happened, I know you've got kids and all these parents were, teaching from home, and they still are going crazy over it, right? Like just like driving them crazy, and maybe even interviewing local parents. Hey, how are you handling so that people can kind of just relate on certain topics and get to know other people. And they're like, how are you doing right now with the whole, teaching at home, and what tips are you doing, and what's driving you crazy, and what's working for you, what's not working for you, and like just things like that even.
Absolutely. It's not a podcast, but one of my local friends years ago started a Facebook group for moms in our community. And at the time she was a stay-at-home mom. And then years later, she became a real estate agent. And now she runs this group. And all these people that are trying to join the group are people that want to move to the area. So
Yeah.
it's turned into this lead funnel for her that she never imagined before, right? And I could see something like that as a podcast, because as people are trying to move to an area, they want to learn about it. And so they might be interested in just a podcast that isn't necessarily about real estate, but that's about that community and people in that community.
Yeah, things to do. I like sometimes I told people to do videos on, like, interview other local professionals and what are things to do and what are the best places to go and where do you take your kids and what's up and coming in the area and what's a hot, topic that's going, what's going on, right? Okay.
Exactly.
So now somebody
Exactly.
has a podcast. How do they market this podcast and get it out there?
Okay. So on whatever platforms you're already on. So if you're already using social media, you can absolutely be sharing it and repurposing that content on your social media, right? So just like we're recording this as a video, I just started doing the same thing with my podcast where, okay, this is audio content, but let's also record the video and edit that up into little pieces that can go on social media all the time, right? So to promote the episode, but that can also stand on its own. It doesn't always have to be directing back to the podcast, right? So reuse that content in a bunch of different ways. So absolutely share on social. You can share with your email list. You can share anywhere you're sharing other content. And also with local, when you're showing up in this way and you're creating this platform, it's newsworthy, right? So this could be something that you could leverage to get in local publications or on the local news. It's certainly something to talk about. And the conversations that you're having on that could also position you just to have more expertise on the area that you can leverage for more publicity as well.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right. So having a podcast works for a local professional realtor, any type of any person, quite frankly. Doesn't have to be niched in on the exact subject. We can just bring some episodes in, or a few minutes out of each episode where you discuss it. Now, talk about how would somebody go about getting on other people's podcasts? And let's just, like, I know I do this. It's one of the strategies that I use on a national level, right? In fact, you and I are going to have a swap podcast. So that's why you're here. I'm going to have you. I'm going to be on yours. I'm so excited to get out. So remember, it's a go-to gal. So if you're listening to this, which of course you are, because you're hearing me, right? You go to the Go-To Gal podcast. And then, so how would being on other people's podcasts nationally help somebody locally that was a local service professional, realtor, lender? Again, how would being on other people's podcasts help them? How would they leverage that?
Absolutely. So one, there may also be podcasts that are local in your area. So not all the podcasts have to be national. So definitely look and see who are other people in your local area or regional area that are showing up and having podcasts, and you could contribute to those conversations. So definitely keep that in mind. But on a national scale, sure, most of those audiences, in fact, maybe all of those audiences are not going to be the target fit for you if you're only working with people locally.
Mm-hmm.
But when you show up and you're sharing your story or your expertise, you now have content that you can share other places. So this gives you unique content that you can be sharing with your community in a way that's easy to listen to, right? And they're going to spend more time with you. It's a podcast episode. So they're going to take you on that hike with the dogs, right? You're spending that time with them. And it doesn't necessarily, it can be on your area of expertise, right? And that adds a little bit more credibility because now you're getting introduced on this podcast as an expert. So the people who are listening to that podcast are getting introduced to you through this lens of you're the authority. And this person who they trust, right, who they're listening to their show, it almost feels like a referral. So it's like, oh, okay. So if they know someone who is local to you, they're going to say, do you know this person? I just listened to this podcast episode and they happen to be local to you, right? So that can happen when you're sharing this with your own community. They now start to look at you in a little bit of a different way because someone else is shining that light on you and positioning you as the expert. And sure, maybe they've been seeing you say it on your own platforms and share your expertise, but there's something about like someone other than mom, quote unquote, saying it, right? Like, oh, okay, like this other person, especially from somewhere else on this national show, that adds another layer of credibility for something, at least where I live. I live in Rochester, New York. And first, there's this perception that if you're on a national podcast or featured in a national publication, it holds so much more weight here than something that's local. And whether that's right or not right, that is the perception that people have. I have people come to me all the time like, okay, I've done stuff locally, but I'm ready for that next level. So it's just as easy to pitch a local podcast as it is to pitch a national podcast. And sometimes that can give you that extra boost of credibility with your existing audience.
Are you wanting a kickstart on your business and you want to learn how to be the go-to professional in your industry? Well, guess what? I've got a challenge for you. It's 5 days of coaching. It's brand new. Just go to KristaMashore.com/client conversion. That's KristaMashore.com/client conversion. And you'll get a training with me for 5 straight days that's going to help kickstart you as the go-to professional in your industry. So sign up and I'll see you there. So then it's like taking that podcast that you're on from someone else's and leveraging it on your social media and marketing it and getting it out there, putting it on your different profiles to show that you actually were featured on those different podcasts to give you more credibility and authority.
Yeah. It's a fun tip, because sometimes it's like, okay, well, I'm on the show, I share it on my stories, or I share it once, and then what? Right. Well, this is something new that I did that is such an easy tip, but I think is something I'm like, everybody needs to do this now.
Yeah.
You go on Spotify, you can create a playlist. So you can put a playlist together of all of your podcast interviews.
The ones you're on,
so easy. Yes. So all the interviews that you've done on other people's shows. So you can have this collection of interviews where this is the easiest content. Like, to sit down and be like, I'm going to come up with like what to say for a monologue for an hour. I mean, that could take me days to come up with, right? But in an interview with someone asking me questions, it just comes out. And for most people, I think it's like this, like, okay, ask me questions. I can talk about my area of expertise. And so to put together this collection, a playlist of interviews, that's something that is now really easy. You can share that link to Spotify. Here's the playlist. And you can share that on your website, on social media,
create a link on Spotify. So explain it. Like, if I was to tell my staff, do this, exactly what I say to them.
Okay. So you need to create a free Spotify account.
Okay.
And then once you have that, you click create a playlist.
Okay.
And you may have to say create a playlist for you may have to go into podcasts and then say create a playlist. And then what you do is you can search your name, or you can search your name and the specific show name that you were on. And let's say you've been a guest now on 3, 4, or 5 shows. You search that and you just click add to playlist. So now you have this very organized playlist. You can create a graphic in Canva if you want for it, of whatever you want to, you can name it whatever you want to call it. And there's a link to share right to that list. So now in your nurture sequences, or in social media, or on your website, or even just if you're talking to someone and they want to hear more about what you do, you can share this link and they can just go binge listen in one place to all these interviews that you've done.
I like that. I love that. I'm actually taking notes.
It's easy, right? Like, this is so easy. And this is a great way to, now they're listening, right? Oh, maybe a cold lead, right? They listen now to these couple of podcast interviews where you're getting introduced as the expert, you're sharing your story, your expertise, and it feels authentic in a way that maybe something overly curated wouldn't have that same feel. And they really get to know you, and they can take you on those, they're doing their chores with you, or they're doing the preschool pickup, right, with you in the car. So you really start to become a part of their life while they're binging that content too.
And they do. I've heard that there's a thing about binge watching, binge listening to these podcasts. It's kind of like listening to an Audible book, right? Like, you're listening to an Audible, you just keep on going. You listen to it. Like, I listen to it in the shower sometimes while I'm putting my makeup on, or while I'm cooking dinner, or just like you said, while I'm out for a walk, whatever it might be. It's the exact same thing. And it's so intimate because you really do start to, develop a relationship with somebody. And while you're all listening right now, I just want to apologize. I've been really bad about doing more of my own podcasting with just like me talking it into the thing. I was so good about it, and then I kind of fell off the wagon. So I'm going to get back on that and start doing that more too. You have my word, everybody.
You know, and that's something that I don't love to do either, because it's like that monologue, right? I'm like, what am I going to say?
Yeah.
And so recently I was saying this to a team member, and I'm like, I have all these stories to share, but I'm like, it feels so overwhelming for me to come up with this, like how I'm going to share them all before I start recording. She's like, what if I just interviewed you? I'm like, on my own podcast? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, let's
I
do
love that.
it.
Yeah, that's great.
Right? And we did it. And we would have loved to do video, but we couldn't make it work. And it was like 8:00 at night one night. And we're like, okay, great. And we just hit record. And she asked me all these questions, and it was so fun and easy. And I'm like, I'm just going to lean more into this. Like, maybe that's what I need to do. But it's still, it gave my listeners that chance to hear my stories and my perspective, right? Which was important to this conversation we were having, without it feeling overly stiff. I mean, some podcasters like literally like write a blog post and read it, right? And like, that's not, I know you're like me, like, no, we just can't do that. My brain works faster than I can read. So it would not sound the same at all. And it feels too stiff, right? It doesn't feel real. So that's where having someone else ask you those questions sometimes, and you could even edit them out, but I didn't. In this case, I left it in, and I'm like, I think I need to make this more of an ongoing strategy, because that was a really easy way to do it.
Oh, great. All right. So I like the idea. So give us some tips on how can people get on other people's podcasts? Like, tell them, I mean, my team, we have this whole strategy that we do, and we actually went through your course. I remember you gave me your course because you sell a course on this. And so we can be sure to tell everyone about how they can get access to that course too, and learn this on their own. But we actually do this. So give some ideas and some tips on, what the step-by-step process and strategy would be to get on other people's podcasts. How would somebody go about doing that?
Sure. So, and yes, and the course you're talking about, it's called the Plug and Pitch System, and it's $27.
The plug and pitch system, $27. And honestly, if you're a marketer, I would say to just go get that, just for the fact that there's a lot of great content in there. Even if you're not wanting to start your own podcast, it's going to give you some great ideas on things. So I would definitely go take a look at that.
Yes. And it gives you the templates to pitch yourself. We do 4 different brand voices, the strategy. It's all about pitching yourself to be a guest on podcasts.
And say the link again.
It's plug and then the letter N pitch.com. So okay. plugandpitch.com.
Okay, perfect.
So here's the philosophy. And my approach to this is a little bit different, because I'm a podcaster who gets pitched every single day for like the last 5.5 years. And most of the pitches are absolutely horrible. And most of the really bad pitches come from agencies, believe it or not. So sometimes people are like, wow, I think I just need to hire an agency for this. And I tell you, the agencies are usually the worst. So be really careful who you hire for that. So that said, pitching a podcast is different than pitching other forms of media. Most podcasters are business owners, entrepreneurs themselves, right? That's not their only business is having this podcast. And most of them are looking in their own inbox. They're going to actually be reading your pitch. So it's important that you keep that in mind, that this is a human who also has their own business that you're pitching. I think the biggest mindset shift to have is when you are pitching, most people say, I would love to be on your show. But here's the thing, like, we know that. Of course you would love to be on our show.
Yeah. I know, how
right.
Well, and that's the hard thing too. So like, I have people reaching out to me too to be on our show. We've got around 30,000 downloads we have a month on our show. And but it's always like, oh, well, here's what I want to be in your show because they know it's going to benefit them. It's like, how can you make it so it's mutually beneficial to the guest and to both, right?
Exactly. So what I think the most important thing to keep in mind is that it's about connecting with that podcaster and then also showing them that you care about their audience. Because as podcasters, we are protective of our audience, right? Especially knowing that when I'm going to introduce this person, it's going to feel like a referral to the people who are listening, right? Yes. So I want to know that I'm keeping my audience and I'm putting them in good hands by bringing someone on the show. So you can absolutely cold pitch, but cold pitch through that lens of how you can help the audience. Don't make it just about you. Really make it on the value you can bring to the show and to that person listening. Now, what's going to make that pitch stand out in my inbox is if I know that person, or if someone who I know is introducing me to that person. I don't want people to feel frustrated, like, well, I don't know every podcast host that I want to pitch. But I think that's where it's important to start with maybe some of those warm or lukewarm connections that you may have. Sometimes those feel harder than the cold pitch because it feels uncomfortable. But if you have a relationship, if you've purchased something from that person before, if you've been at an event with that person before, if you are like actually friends with this person, right? That is usually the best place to start. And then you start building your confidence with what are you talking about? And also, if you've never been on a podcast before and you don't have your own podcast, that's a big chance for some totally cold podcaster to take on you, right? So showing that you've done this before is also going to help you get that yes.
Yes. Okay, good. Well, this has been awesome. I mean, I just, anyone that can see you can just see you're like this ray of shining light, and you totally believe in what you're saying. You've got to go follow Jaclyn. Go and check out her podcast, The Go-To Gal. Go and get her offer. I mean, $27, right? Pitch and plug. Yeah, pitchandplug.com.
Plug and pitch.
Plug and pitch. Plugandpitch.com.
I'll send you the link for the show notes, but yes, plugandpitch.com.
And follow her, because we speak the same method, and she really, really, truly is a marketer. She's a digital marketer. She knows what she's doing. She's got a great online presence and a really great, massive community. Jaclyn, thank you so much. I always end every single podcast the same, and it goes like this. If you were to give one piece of advice, whether it is personal or business or anything at all, what would it be?
Ooh, it's going to be people. Just invest in the people. I think it's so easy to get stuck in automation and how do we make everything, perfect and all of that. But what I found is whether it's through podcasting or programs or even social media, it just all comes back to relationships. And so really, like, if it's your team, if it's the people who are hiring you, your clients, like wherever it is, but just not letting the technology keep you at a distance from the people.
I want you to know something. One of my key things is people before things, and the things will come, right? Like serve, don't sell mentality. Like serve, don't sell, and you ultimately will sell. And people before things, and the things will come. I've always said that, and I cannot tell you how true it is. And automation is great, but you can't take the human being out of everything, right? Just take care of people.
And of course, I feel like we're on such the same wavelength with all of this stuff. So of course we have the same philosophy there too.
We are. Well, thank you so much for being on here. Obviously, I respect you so much. And Jaclyn is actually in a little mastermind group that I have that we're both involved in. And so she's just always just what you're seeing right now is how Jaclyn is. So thank you for your time. We appreciate it. You being here, Jaclyn, so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This has been a blast. And I always get such an energy boost talking to you. So always fun to be around you. Well,
the feeling is mutual. And listen, everyone, it's really great to listen, but everything comes in the implementation phase. So be sure to take action. Go download her guide. It will help your business. And I cannot wait to see you next time. And as always, thank you so much for your time. I'll see you next time. Don't forget, it's time to get fired up. Hey there, I have a brand new podcast called Fired Up with Krista Mashore, where I bring my high energy right to your ears. This podcast is available on all your favorite podcast platforms. So do me a favor, go subscribe and leave a review. All this information is free, and I cannot wait to teach you everything I know. Thanks so much for watching my video. You can learn more about how to be a successful real estate professional by watching other videos that I have. And be sure to subscribe to my channel. And as always, make it a great home selling and buying day.